Ladies and gentlemen, if you're ever having a bad day, just remember something. The world champion of chess, Magnus Carlsen, has never defeated any of you in a game of chess. You are actually undefeated against one of the greatest chess players of all time. I hope that makes you feel better. Now, many of the world's best players are not undefeated against Magnus Carlsen. They have definitely lost games to him, especially on the lower end of the age range of some of the highest ranked chess players in the world. But sometimes chess prodigies do strike back or strike for the first time. And it's always fascinating to see the next wave of chess players taking on the best player of the modern generation and actually defeating him. Now, yesterday I made a video on Gukesh, the youngest ever chess player to beat Magnus at his current state, about 16 years of age, one of the prodigies of India. And today I am going to show you another prodigy of India, Erigaisi, taking on the world champ in these online events and getting the best of him. And, yes, in some ways, things have been, you could say spoiled. You say, oh, spoilers, this and that. But it's not actually such a big problem if the game itself was spectacular and just the shock value of the result is there. Also, if a Slack notification just popped up and you heard it, I'm very sorry about that. I just got a desktop notification from Slack, which almost never happens. But if not, and you just think I'm insane, well, then that's fine. D4 from Erigaisi. Magnus Carlsen plays the move G6, and now we go back via transposition to a modern defense. Now, recently, Carlsen and Erigaisi played, and Magnus did in fact hit him with a modern defense via this move order. But D4 G6 is a way to, again, kind of get this modern setup with A6, D6, G6, bishop on G7. And white can do a variety of things, like keep the position a queen's pawn or go back to a king's pawn. In this game, Erigaisi goes to a king's pawn, and the first 5 moves are all kind of very normal. Black is preparing the move B5 here. White is kind of showing early signs of wanting to castle long. But also there is H4, H5 potentially for white. And white can also go back to castling short. Like white, this might be a fake out, So Magnus here sends the signal to white with the move B5 that if you do in fact castle long, you will be under attack. It's not too late for white to bail and play a move like knight F3, but it's not the critical approach. The critical approach to this position is to put this battery together, go down to H6, not right now because you would lose the bishop, but when this knight comes here, trade off this bishop, launch an attack on the king, which is hopefully going to castle short, right? So we have long castle. This position has been reached many, many thousands of times. Now, some of you looking at this might be wondering, can't black go here? The answer is yes. But generally, black doesn't play this move. It's a little bit of an overextension. It's better for black to finish with knight d7 or bishop b7 or just do something in a developmental way. Like, just do something first, like get a piece out. I mean, this is not like the, world-ending move over here, but just prepare the position before you go on an attack. Magnus plays this. Now, he didn't just make that up, okay? Like, he's obviously done his work, he studied it, and he's basically evaluated the fact that the position after white jumps into the center, forcing now black to defend this pawn, right, to play a5. Magnus thinks that this is a calculated risk worth taking. You'll notice that black has made 7 moves. Almost all of them have been with pawns. All black has is this bishop, right? White now can kind of slow play with F3, then maybe G4, or white can just go directly for the kill with H4. Erigaisi does the principal thing, which is playing the move H4 and looking to play the move H5. Now, if black plays H5 himself, which is what I always recommend to people, then white has access to certain dark squares. White can play knight h3, knight g5, or knight f4, or bishop g5, and it's just kind of unpleasant to play here with black. You've kind of overcommitted trying to stop white from pushing the pawns, but you've made your dark squares very vulnerable, and just not to mention white gets a lot of very easy piece placement. So instead of that, Magnus plays the move h6. h6 covers the dark squares and is attempting to bait white into playing h5. And then this, and actually this is very sturdy for black, because sacrificing does absolutely nothing. In fact, sacrificing would just lose white the game after the move bishop to h6. If you play a move like f4, thinking like, oh, I'm attacking, you're actually just getting your knight trapped. So white needs to live with the responsibility of having moved this knight in the middle. So instead of playing h5, Erigaisi plays the move f3, which is a good move. You want this in the future. You bring your knight back if it gets attacked. Magnus plays knight d7, and now we have the move g4. Very clear indication early on from Erigaisi. He is not going to be bullied by the world champion. He is going to attack him, and he is going to show no mercy. But he hasn't given an indication of which of these pawns he's going to move forward. He's just sort of put them all forward. Depending on what Magnus plays now, is how white will react. So Magnus kicks out the knight to f4. You might ask yourself all the way back here, why didn't Erigaisi play a move like knight e2 if he was always going to kind of get kicked out of the center? Well, the point is that this knight is not really in a threatening position. The knight on d5 actually demands attention. It's like basketball, right? When a person drives toward the basket, sometimes the defense collapses, and then the person can throw the ball out. So this knight is sort of designed to make black make moves to attack it with moves like e6, right? And now after knight f4, white's knight now has some targets. Now, chasing this knight is utterly horrible because the knight will arrive on h5 from where you see the eval, despite being totally equal, white is completely winning. So Magnus plays knight e7 instead, and again, you have a situation where white actually cannot move any pawn forward. If white moves this pawn forward, black will very quickly take or even play e5. If white moves this pawn forward, they just lose a pawn. That doesn't make any sense. If white plays g5, then black is going to take, and you can't even take back because you're going to lose your rook. And if white plays h5, we've already been here before, g5 kicks the knight out, and black has absolutely no problems. In fact, black can actually attack white after, so none of those pawn moves make any sense. So what do you do when you can't move any pawns? Well, you can finish your development, or you can make just a generally useful move, which is king b1. King b1 is always a useful move for two reasons. It supports the a2 pawn from any sort of just attack on it. And also the c1 square is extremely useful for defending the white position. Sometimes there will be a knight there, which guards a2, and sometimes the bishop will drop back. King b1 is almost always a useful move when you have castled queenside. And now it's back to Magnus. So Magnus develops his bishop. So Magnus is still, with his last several moves, just making improving moves. Developing his knight, kicking out the knight, developing the knight via the previous move, right? Now developing the bishop. Knight e2. Okay. The forces are now set up. Black has the option to continue general improvement, to try to play c5. Black can also play knight c6, trying to bait the move d5 out of white, opening up the bishop, trying to get knight into the middle. Short castle here is a little bit too dangerous, I think. I think white just has a very scary armada ready to arrive over here. Magnus decides, well, look, I can't really do a whole lot here, okay? So I can lash at the center with e5, I can lash at the center with d5, I can lash at the center with c5. Not all of these moves are the same, so let me play the move d5. And I think Magnus's intention there was that if Arjun takes, knight takes is a very nice exchange, bishop here will face this way, but he also probably thought Erigaisi would play e5, and then Magnus would go here, undermining the center. Arjun played the best move, which is knight g3. You'll notice that Arjun's previous move was knight e2. The knight was always going to head here, now it supports the center. Okay? And now Magnus develops the knight further out, just like white's knight, right? This knight now has a few ideas, supporting the center and also jumping into the c4 square from where it's going to attack these two pieces. Just so you understand, the knight arriving on c4 would be a serious problem for white, who would lose one of his bishops, and this would just continue for the black attack. Like, this is just only a trade that benefits black. So Arjun moves his queen out of the way to e1, and when knight c4 happens, remember a long time ago Arjun played king b1? He's doing Magnesian things against Magnus. He's like understanding time, space, harmony, right? Just like, look at this. Just putting all his pieces back, because it's actually not bad. He's allowing the knight to wander into his position, because black actually doesn't have a threat. Like, if black continues to with a4, you take, and then you take, right? You take on b4, and you're just winning more material. Black doesn't really have anything else. Like, if black plays queen d7, queen here, like, there's nothing there. Now you start breaking down the center. So Magnus plays queen d6. And Arjun here plays a very interesting idea. Like, if I gave you a lot of guesses here, this move looks like it could be in guess the elo, because it just looks so illogical. You know what he plays here? Magnus, again, by the way, wants e5 baited. So he would rotate c5 and start the attack. Arjun plays rook h2. That move doesn't look like it makes any sense at all. But the idea is deep. There's a deep idea behind this move. It's to get the rook involved, not just on the attack, okay? Not just on any of these attacks. It's to help the king. So rook h2 is a very multi-purpose move. You get your rook out of any nonsense on this diagonal when it opens up, but you want to still keep the rook involved, right? But you also want it to defend the king when this pawn goes up one square. And when black castles long, and Arjun finally does this, plays the move c3, okay? He's going to be helping himself with the rook. But he played too slow. As you can see, black is better. That's what happens. Play Magnus. He gets you into a complex modern position where the engine is claiming you're better, but you don't know how you're better. And then you play a couple of moves with some plans, suddenly you're worse. How does that happen? Well, Arjun was just too slow. The computer here wants e takes d5, and if black plays e takes d5, for example, it wants h5, g5, and now it wants to arrive with the knight on f5. And even then, it's not so clear, like, you can't take because of mate. It's not even clear where the attack really is. The attack is apparently in just having a slightly better position. And not to mention that Magnus probably wouldn't even have taken it back with the knight. He would have taken with the bishop or something. Like, bishop takes d5. And the computer here claims that, you know, black is much worse, but it's not so easy to see how when all your pieces are on the back rank. Like, how is it +2, right? So Arjun does this. Suddenly he's worse. After the move knight c6, his plan was inaccurate, and Magnus is once again taking over the game, as he has in their previous matchups. a4. That's it, right? It's just going to be yet another defeat for Arjun, who's succumbed once again to the pressure of the world champ, the experience of the world champ. a3 is on the way. That's it. No. At this point, Arjun picks himself up, dusts himself off, and says, I am not going to be bullied. Knight back to d3, best move. If black arrives on the shores with a3, you will take on b4 and poke a hole in the attack. There's going to be nothing here. Bishop f8. Magnus activates another piece. Arjun now says, counterattack. I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I'm not scared of any of this, Magnus. What are you going to do? f4 and f5 is on the way. Magnus is like, Bishop a6. So another bishop move. This bishop came this way. This bishop goes out this way. Okay. And the attack continues. f5. Now, the computer's not giving it the blessing because apparently, you know, apparently this attack is way too strong for black. Now, black has a couple of ways here to play. The strongest way is knight 6, because this is for a5 with knight b3 ideas. That's a very interesting way to play. But there's other ways. You know, black can take on f5 first and then do all that. I think this is actually the top recommendation of the computer. I'm not really sure what the difference is. Apparently the difference is that after takes, there is not much difference. Okay, yeah. But basically the entire idea here is to bring this knight out this way. And that's what Arjun made him do. Arjun put Magnus in a tough spot to prove that his attack is actually strong. Magnus plays king to d7. King d7. What is the point of that move? Well, the idea is to go rook b8, and this is checkmate. Straight up a mate. Now, Arjun could here sit still, put his queen on c2, desperately defend against mate. Arjun says, wait a minute. Take. What? Huh? But what about my attack? What about my attack? Magnus has misevaluated something. Because after this, there is knight c5 check. And this is a serious problem. Magnus is much worse. You don't even need to see that from the eval bar. Yes, the eval bar shows Magnus is much worse. But what about this? Now, Magnus must have thought that after king to d8, he was completely fine. Magnus must have thought knight e6, king c8, it's still mate. But it's not. It's this and this. Now, Arjun made this for himself. In this position, Magnus could have simply steamrolled Arjun. Arjun decided to launch the only thing that he had, the f-pawn. like a pogo stick into the black position, and it pays off because Magnus goes astray. And suddenly queen g6. What is happening here? He left his knight on c5, but he's giving up his knight because he wants to open the position. Magnus takes on e5. So if Arjun takes this, then the queen takes the knight for free. Arjun instead plays knight takes e6 check. Hits the king, guarded by the queen. This is next. We have this, we have this, we have this. Now, what do you do here? You're up a pawn suddenly against the world champ. Queen e4 back. Threatens the pawn. Can't take because of this. King moves to c6. What a move. Queen is now hanging again. Arjun goes here. Understanding that the attacking phase of the game is over, it's time to transition the game into a middle/endgame type of battle, where white has 5 pawns, black has 4. Why is white so much better here, though? Because black's defenses are rapidly collapsing. You see, this knight attacks this pawn, and had he gone back this way, Arjun would have walked in with his e-pawn, and this rook that he moved to h2 a long time ago would have been able to go to e2, supporting the e-pawn. So bishop to c5, Arjun grabs a second pawn. And then, what do you do in a position where you are winning? You trade. Bishop takes the knight, bishop takes the bishop. Magnus now has less material to work with here. We have e6, rook e8, and rook to e1. Arjun Erigaisi is 2 pawns up. But Magnus is not going to go away. And he shuts the door very quickly on the rook's defense of the pawn. Oh my goodness. And maybe he's going to win d4. But Arjun, a step ahead, picks up the menacing pawn on a3, which controls the white king, and just comes back with his bishop. He doesn't care about giving up this pawn because he realizes that when everything is said and done, it's all about the pawns in endgames, right? It's all about the pawn. Look at the pawns. Whose pawns are better? Rook c4 check, rook a6, and he just trades rooks. Look at the pawns. White has gh running hand in hand together. And on the other side of the board, the best possible situation, white has an outside pass pawn. White has the 3 pawns that are separated by the maximum number of distance. That means that black is defenseless. Black is going to be unable to deal with the advancement. And not to mention, black's pawns are doubled. So black's pawns are a complete non-factor. Magnus plays a few more moves. Arjun pushes his pawns to the brink of promotion. And right here, Magnus Carlsen resigned. Because you cannot stop all pawns. If you go here, here, and something like king g8, I will simply win both pawns. If you keep your bishop defending the pawns like this, I will just play a4. Maybe first I will defend this pawn, actually, bishop f4. That's it. That's the end of the game. I feel like Arjun beat Magnus in many ways the way Magnus beats people. You might be worse for a move in some complicated game, but you just launched this ultra powerful attack, right? You go all the way here. Magnus started making progress. And the second that Magnus actually had to prove that he was better, Arjun made him prove it with high stakes on the board. And Magnus didn't prove it the right way, misevaluating this incoming assault with the queen and the horse. And then it just was effortless from Arjun. So a very convincing win for Arjun Erigaisi. Yesterday, Gukesh was under a lot of pressure by Magnus. He managed to still pull it out. I feel like this was kind of a little bit of a different game, but it's just interesting to see this next generation of young talents taking on the world champ and just sort of doing their thing, you know, definitely feeling his presence and the power, but hanging in there, creating counterplay, and making a name for themselves. So a huge win for Erigaisi, who now joins a trio of Indian teenagers to have beaten Magnus in recent months in these online events. Erigaisi has yet to beat him in a match, but he has beat him in 1 game so far. And that's big. That'll do wonderful things for his confidence. It's a big breakthrough, and it's just very, very cool to see. I will see you in the next video as we continue to watch some of these young guys taking on the world champ, as well as some other fascinating games. But till then, get out of here.